The Galactic Alliance Council chamber had never felt so suffocating. Representatives from 37 advanced species sat in tense silence as holographic displays showed the same grim trajectory. Defeat after defeat, system after system falling to the scourge. Admiral Forlag of the Xyler, a species renowned for their logical precision and analytical prowess, stood rigid before the curved table of the High Council. "The statistical models are conclusive," he said, his metallic voice echoing through the vast chamber. "At current depletion rates, our defensive capabilities will be overwhelmed within 17 galactic cycles. The Scourge's collective intelligence continues to perfect its predictive algorithms. They anticipate our every move with 99.87% accuracy." High Counselor Zuri, the ancient meridian whose crystalline body refracted the chamber's light into prismatic patterns, leaned forward. "Then we must find a solution that defies prediction." "That is precisely the problem," Forlag responded. "Our most brilliant strategists have attempted to introduce randomness, asymmetry, and chaos into our battle plans. The Scourge's adaptive networks simply incorporate these elements into their models. They learn, they adjust, they predict anew." The holographic display shifted to show the latest catastrophe, the fall of the Cestus defensive line. The perfect formation of Alliance ships had been countered by an equally perfect Scourge response. "We have exhausted all conventional and unconventional options available to logical species," said First Minister Alora of the Telepathic Venn Collective. "Which leaves us with the recommendation our analysts have repeatedly suggested, despite our reluctance." The chamber grew impossibly more silent. "The humans," she said simply. A low murmur spread through the council. Admiral Forlag's facial ridges darkened, the Xyler equivalent of a scowl. "With respect, First Minister, the humans?" Forlag's voice dripped with disdain. "That species has barely mastered interstellar travel. They have spent more of their history killing each other than exploring the stars. Their societies remain fractured, their decision-making processes contaminated by emotion, their strategic thinking primitive and erratic." "Precisely," said Alora. "They are everything the Scourge is not." The central hologram shifted again, displaying Earth and its relatively modest interstellar territories, a tiny fraction of Alliance space. "The Earth Defense Force has only been a provisional member of the Alliance for 6 cycles," continued Forlag. "They have contributed nothing of significance to our scientific or military capabilities. Their ships are crude, their weapons inefficient." He gestured dismissively. "And need I remind the Council of their bizarre history? These creatures once based entire military strategies on concepts like blitzkrieg and shock and awe, emotional manipulation masquerading as tactics." High Counselor Zari's crystalline form glimmered as she spoke. "And yet, our predictive models suggest a 78% probability the human unpredictability might succeed where our logical approaches have failed." "That is a desperate interpretation of flawed data," Forlag snapped. First Minister Alora raised a slender hand. "We are, by definition, desperate, Admiral. The Scourge has assimilated our most brilliant strategies. They have adapted to our every approach. Perhaps we need a species whose thought processes are as alien to the Scourge as they sometimes seem to us." The debate raged for hours. Examples of human irrationality were cited. Their contradictory political systems, their willingness to sacrifice efficiency for concepts like freedom and individual choice, their propensity for creating art and music even in the midst of crisis, their baffling habit of engaging in recreational activities that mimic danger and death. In the end, necessity overcame prejudice. The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. "Let the record show," intoned High Counselor Zuri, "that the Galactic Alliance has formally requested the assistance of the Earth Defense Force in combating the Scourge threat. May the cosmos forgive our desperation." Captain Eva Rostova stood on the bridge of the EDF flagship Unpredictable, staring at the communication from Alliance High Command. At 36, she was young for her position, but her unconventional approaches to tactical problems had accelerated her rise through the ranks. "They want our help?" Lieutenant Kaido Tanaka, her tactical officer, read the message over her shoulder. The same alliance that's been treating us like children playing with sticks since we joined. Desperate times, Rostova said, a half-smile playing on her lips. Apparently we're their last hope. More like last resort, said Tanaka. The Unpredictable was not an impressive vessel by Alliance standards. Its hull was a patchwork of Earth-forged alloys and adapted alien technologies, where Alliance ships featured sleek, mathematically perfect designs. The Unpredictable was asymmetrical, with weapon systems retrofitted based on battlefield experience rather than theoretical optimization. Captain, called Communications Officer Rivera, we're receiving coordinates for rendezvous with the Alliance flagship Logical Conclusion. Admiral Forlag requests your presence for tactical briefing. Forlag, Rostova Muzit. The Xyler who called humans emotionally compromised primates at the last Security Council. This should be fun, said Tanaka with a grin. 3 days later, Rostova stepped onto the immaculate bridge of the Logical Conclusion. The difference between this vessel and her own was stark. Every surface gleamed with perfect symmetry. The crew moved with choreographed precision. At the center stood Admiral Forlag, his blue-gray skin and pronounced facial ridges giving him the appearance of a statue carved from living stone. Captain Rostova, he said, not extending his hand as human protocol would suggest. Your promptness is appreciated. Admiral, she replied, offering a crisp salute instead of the expected Alliance greeting gesture. Two could play at cultural discomfort. The tactical briefing was comprehensive. The Scourge had originated in the distant Carina Arm, a collective intelligence that evolved from what might have once been individual organisms. They functioned as a unified mind across countless bodies, their ships moving in perfect coordination. Their technology was organic synthetic, self-repairing, and constantly evolving. Most troubling was their ability to analyze and predict enemy tactics. After each encounter with Alliance forces, the Scourge became more effective at countering their strategies. They learned, they adapted, they assimilated. As the briefing concluded, Rostova studied the battle data with narrowed eyes. Has anyone tried not giving them a pattern to adapt to? Admiral Forlag blinked slowly. Explain. You're fighting them with optimal tactical formations, perfect response times, and mathematically sound strategies, she said. You're playing a game they're designed to win. So stop playing their game. War is not a game, Captain. But games teach us about war, she countered. On Earth, we have strategic simulations where players compete against artificial intelligences. The AIs always win when the game has perfect information and clear rules. But introduce ambiguity, bluffing, or seemingly irrational choices, and human players gain the advantage. You suggest we bluff against an enemy that threatens our civilization? Forlag's voice was cold. I suggest we stop being predictable, Rostova replied, unfazed. Your data shows the Scourge is preparing to attack the Lyra cluster. Your response is to establish a defensive perimeter based on resource concentration and strategic value. It's logical, efficient, and exactly what they'll expect. And what would you propose instead, Captain? Some human tactic involving emotional appeals to an enemy incapable of emotion. Rostova smiled. Something like that. The Alliance commanders watched with thinly veiled skepticism as Rostova outlined her plan. Instead of a conventional defense of the Lyra cluster, she proposed dividing their forces. The main Alliance fleet would establish a partial defensive line, familiar enough to the Scourge to seem predictable. Meanwhile, smaller, faster human vessels would operate independently, targeting unexpected points in the Scourge formation. This dispersion of forces violates every principle of unified defense, objected a Tellurian commander. You would have us sacrifice coherence for what? Chaos. Controlled chaos, Rostova corrected. And I'm not asking you to sacrifice your entire defense. Just allow my ships to operate alongside yours, using our own protocols. Your ships are technologically inferior, Forlag stated flatly. True, Rostova conceded, but the Scourge won't be expecting what we do with them. After hours of debate, a compromise was reached. The main Alliance fleet would maintain its standard defense strategy for the Lyra cluster. The human vessels, all 23 of them, would be permitted to engage using Rostova's unconventional tactics. "I hope you understand what's at stake, Captain," Forlag said as the meeting concluded. "The Lyra cluster contains 17 inhabited worlds." Rostova met his gaze. "We understand stakes, Admiral. Humans have been gambling with survival since before we discovered fire." The Scourge attack on the Lyra cluster began exactly as the Alliance analyst had predicted. A massive formation of biomechanical ships, moving with unsettling synchronization, approached the main defensive line. The Alliance fleet arranged itself in optimal defensive patterns, weapons charged, shields at maximum efficiency, and they were systematically taken apart. The Scourge, having encountered similar formations in previous battles, had already developed counters for every standard Alliance maneuver. Their ships targeted weak points with surgical precision, adapting in real time to Alliance responses. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, the Alliance fleet began to buckle. Then the humans entered the fray. Instead of joining the main battle, the EDF vessels scattered, attacking from multiple vectors. They targeted seemingly random Scourge vessels, not the command ships or largest threats, but communication relays, resource transports, and perimeter scouts. On the bridge of the unpredictable, Rostova watched the tactical display with intense focus. "Tanaka, execute maneuver Foxtrot. Rivera, transmit false fleet signatures to coordinates Delta through Kilo." The unpredictable suddenly broadcast energy signatures matching an Alliance cruiser squadron, while actually diverting to a completely different position. Other EDF ships deployed electronic countermeasures that created phantom targets or disguised their actual capabilities. "Epsilon Squadron, execute Thunder Run," Rostova ordered. 5 outdated EDF corvettes, retrofitted with oversized engines and weapon systems pushed far beyond safety parameters, suddenly accelerated to suicidal speeds directly toward a concentration of Scourge vessels. Their reactors essentially turning into controlled bombs. They wreak havoc through the Scourge formation before their crews ejected in survival pods. "What are they doing?" demanded Forlag from the logical conclusion. "Buying time," Rostova replied through the comm channel, "and teaching the Scourge something new." The Scourge collective intelligence, for the first time, encountered actions it could not immediately categorize or predict. Human ships engaged and disengaged seemingly at random. They sacrificed valuable assets for minimal strategic gain. They ignored obvious targets to strike at obscure ones. The hive mind struggled to identify the pattern because there was no pattern, only human intuition, gut feelings, and calculated risk-taking that defied logical analysis. Confusion spread through the Scourge network. Ships hesitated as contradictory analyses cascaded through the collective intelligence. The unified response fractured as different segments of the hive mind reached different conclusions about the optimal counter to the humans' chaotic tactics. Seizing the opportunity, Rostova coordinated with the Alliance fleet. "Admiral Forlag, the Scourge coordination is compromised. Their formation at Sector 7 is vulnerable to a concentrated strike." Despite his reservations, Forlag recognized the opportunity. The Alliance ships regrouped and struck hard at the identified weakness. For the first time in the war, the Scourge forces were thrown into disarray. The battle for the Lyra cluster lasted 14 hours. When it ended, the Alliance had suffered heavy losses, nearly 40% of their fleet. But the Scourge had retreated, not strategically withdrawn, but actually retreated in disarray. It was unprecedented. In the aftermath, Rostova stood again on the bridge of the logical conclusion, facing a silent Admiral Forlag. "Your tactics," he finally said, "were inefficient, wasteful, and violated all established strategic protocols." A pause. "They were also effective." The Scourge retreated. "They'll be back," Rostova said, "and they'll have learned from this encounter." "Yes," Forlag agreed. "But perhaps we have something to learn as well." In the weeks following the Battle of Lyra, the Alliance's attitude toward humans underwent a subtle, but significant shift. Research teams began studying Earth's military history, psychological profiles, and cultural expressions. Terms like asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, and psychological operations entered alliance strategic discussions. A joint task force was established, with Rostova appointed as a key strategic advisor. However, tensions remained. Many alliance commanders viewed the human involvement as a necessary evil rather than a genuine partnership. Lieutenant Kaido Tanaka emerged as an invaluable asset in this new phase. His background in electronic warfare and artificial intelligence made him uniquely qualified to analyze the Scourge's collective intelligence. Unlike many humans, Tanaka could think with machine-like precision, but he applied this ability in creative ways no machine would conceive. The Scourge operates on consensus algorithms, he explained during a strategic briefing. Each unit submits its sensory data and analysis to the collective, which then reaches optimal decisions through a kind of distributed democracy. It's elegant, but has inherent vulnerabilities. Dr. Eris Thorne, the reluctant xenobiologist-turned-diplomat on Rostova's team, built upon Tanaka's insights. Tall, with prematurely silver hair despite being only 42, Thorne had spent years studying the psychology of non-human species. The Scourge Collective is not truly a hive mind in the sense we originally thought, he suggested. It's more of a consensus-building network. Individual units retain some autonomy, but surrender final decision-making to the collective intelligence. This explains both their incredible coordination and their temporary confusion when faced with scenarios outside their experiential framework. The respite from Scourge attacks did not last long. Intelligence reports soon detected unusual activity in 3 separate sectors. The Scourge was on the move again, but something had changed. Their formations were different, less rigidly geometric, more fluid and unpredictable. Scout reports indicated they had developed new ship classes with greater individual capabilities. Most concerning, they appear to be incorporating randomness into their tactics, an echo of the human approach that had confounded them at Lyra. They're learning, Rostova observed grimly during a command briefing, adapting to our adaptations. As we predicted, Forlag replied, the Scourge assimilates all tactical information it encounters. Your chaos has simply given it a new variable to incorporate. The next Scourge attack came at the Helios sector, a resource-rich region with minimal civilian presence. Both Alliance and EDF forces were prepared for battle, but the Scourge had indeed evolved. Their ships no longer moved in perfect unison, but operated in semi-autonomous groups. When human vessels attempted to use the same disruption tactics that had worked at Lyra, the Scourge responded with their own version of unpredictability. Electronic countermeasures were countered, feints were ignored, ambushes were anticipated. The battle ended not in victory, but in costly stalemate. Alliance and human forces managed to prevent the Scourge from capturing the Helios sector, but at a terrible price. 7 EDF ships were destroyed, along with 13 Alliance vessels. In the aftermath, tensions within the Joint Task Force reached a breaking point. A faction of Alliance commanders, led by the Tellurian General Mazin, openly blamed the humans. Your species has taught the Scourge how to be unpredictable, Mazin accused during a heated post-battle analysis. You've made them more dangerous, not less. They were always going to adapt, Rostova countered. At least now we know they can be thrown off balance. We just need to stay ahead of their adaptation curve. And how do you propose to do that, Captain? Asked Forlag, who had remained neutral during the exchange. If they can now incorporate randomness into their tactics, what advantage do humans still offer? Before Rostova could answer, a priority communication interrupted the meeting. The message was from Earth Central Command, and its contents sent a chill through the human contingent. Political pressure was mounting back home. The losses at Helios had made headlines. Opposition parties were questioning the cost in human lives for a war that many Earth citizens saw as primarily an Alliance problem. There were calls to withdraw at least half the EDF fleet to defend Sol System directly. Your government is considering abandoning the Alliance? Forlag asked when he learned of the message. Not abandoning, Rostova clarified. Reducing their commitment. There are those who believe we should focus on defending our own territory rather than fighting the scourge at the galactic level. A short-sighted view, said Forlag. If the Alliance falls, how long do they imagine Earth would stand alone? I know that, Rostova replied, and I'll make that case to my superiors. But I need something concrete to show them, some evidence that this partnership is worth the cost. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Alliance intelligence discovered that the Scourge was constructing something massive in a distant, nebula-shrouded region of space known as the Shroud. The purpose was unknown, but energy readings suggested a project of unprecedented scale. The Alliance High Command immediately began planning a major offensive. Tactical simulations, however, showed dismal results. The Shroud's unique properties interfered with sensors and communications. The Scourge defenses were layered and formidable. A conventional attack would face 93% probability of catastrophic failure. Faced with these odds, Rostova proposed an alternative, a covert infiltration mission using a single, specially modified vessel. The ship would combine human stealth technology, crude but effective, with Alliance energy masking techniques. A small team would penetrate the Shroud, gather intelligence on the Scourge project, and, if possible, sabotage it from within. The proposal met with vehement opposition. This plan borders on suicidal, declared General Mazin. The probability of successful infiltration is negligible. Conventional probability doesn't apply here, argued Dr. Thorne. The Shroud's unique properties and our combined stealth measures create too many variables for standard analysis. Even if infiltration succeeded, Forlag noted, what could a single ship accomplish against a facility of that scale? Sometimes the smallest stone causes the largest avalanche, Rostova replied. We don't need to destroy their project ourselves, just find its critical vulnerability. Earth Central Command was equally skeptical. The mission represented an enormous risk for questionable reward. They strongly advised against Rostova's personal involvement, insisting that the EDF could not afford to lose its most experienced commander in what they termed a high-risk, low-probability operation. Rostova, however, was convinced this mission represented their best, perhaps only, chance to gain a decisive advantage over the Scourge. After exhaustive debate and planning, a compromise was reached. The mission would proceed with a volunteer crew, using a specially modified EDF scout ship, Christen Whisper. Against explicit orders, Rostova insisted on leading the mission herself. This is my plan, she told her superiors. I won't ask others to take risks I'm unwilling to face. Joining her would be Lieutenant Tanaka, whose expertise in Scourge communication systems would be essential, and a renowned Alliance infiltration specialist, a lithe, almost spectral member of the Chkar species named Selith, whose natural abilities included enhanced stealth and extraordinary spatial awareness. The Whisper departed from Alliance space with minimal ceremony. It was a small vessel, barely 50 meters long, with a reinforced hull coated in experimental, light-absorbing materials. Its engines had been modified to emit minimal energy signatures, and its interior had been stripped down to essential systems only. For 7 days, they traveled through increasingly hazardous regions of space. As they approached the Shroud, communications with Alliance Command became intermittent, then non-existent. They were truly alone. The Shroud lived up to its name, a vast nebula of ionized gases and cosmic dust that blocked most conventional scanning methods. Navigating through it required Rostova's full attention, combining instrument readings with gut instinct when sensors failed. On the 10th day, they detected the first signs of Scourge presence, automated sentry platforms floating silently in the nebula's currents. Using the Whisper's advanced stealth systems and Selith's uncanny spatial intuition, they managed to slip past these outer defenses. As they penetrated deeper into the Shroud, the nebula began to thin, revealing glimpses of what lay at its heart. At first, they thought it was a space station or perhaps a shipyard. But as more of the structure became visible, they realized its true scale. That's not a facility, whispered Tanaka, staring at the sensor display. It's a megastructure. Stretching across thousands of kilometers was a vast, intricate lattice of biomechanical components. Parts of it pulsed with energy flows that mimicked neural pathways. Others contained what appeared to be massive processing nodes. "What are we looking at, Lieutenant?" Rostova asked, her voice hushed despite the impossibility of being overheard. Tanaka's fingers flew across his console, analyzing the sensor data. Based on the energy signatures and structural configuration, it appears to be some kind of consciousness processing array. Massive scale. Dr. Thorne, who had insisted on joining the mission despite the risks, studied the readings with growing horror. "It's an assimilation engine," he said finally. "A machine designed to absorb and integrate the consciousness of other species into the Scourge collective." The implications were staggering. The Scourge wasn't simply planning to conquer Alliance space. They intended to forcibly assimilate every sentient being into their collective intelligence. "Can it work?" Rostova asked. "Theoretically," Thorne replied, "if they could capture and process enough subjects. Yes, they could extract neural patterns, memories, cultural data, everything that makes a species unique, and incorporate it into their collective, making them even more adaptive," Tanaka added grimly. "Imagine if they could think like Xylars and humans and Tellurians all at once." Rostova studied the structure, looking for weaknesses. There must be a control center, some kind of central node that coordinates the whole system. Using the Whisper's passive sensors, they mapped as much of the megastructure as possible without revealing their presence. After hours of careful analysis, they identified what appeared to be a central processing hub, heavily shielded and protected by concentrated Scourge forces. "That's our target," Rostova decided. "We need to get closer, gather detailed scans, and if possible, plan a sabotage device." The approach was painstaking. The Whisper drifted through the shrouds, thinning gases, using minimal propulsion and letting natural currents carry them when possible. Seleth proved invaluable. Her species evolved sensitivity to spatial relationships, allowing her to anticipate detection zones before sensors could confirm them. They came within 10 kilometers of the central hub, close enough for detailed scans, but still outside the densest security perimeter. What they discovered was both encouraging and daunting. "The hub contains a quantum processing core," Tanaka reported. "It's the brain of the entire operation. Disrupt that, and the whole assimilation engine might collapse." "But the security is like nothing I've ever seen," added Seleth, her voice a melodic whisper. "Layered sensor grids, automated defense platforms, and at least 30 Scourge vessels in constant patrol patterns." Rostova considered their options. "We can't approach any closer in the Whisper without detection. We need another way in." They formulated a daring plan. The Whisper would launch a series of remote drones programmed to create sensor ghosts, false readings that would distract Scourge security systems. Meanwhile, Seleth would pilot a minimal life support pod carrying herself, Tanaka, and a compact sabotage device directly to the hub's outer shell. The plan was fraught with risk, but they had come too far to turn back with only partial intelligence. If successful, they could deliver a crippling blow to the Scourge's most ambitious project. The operation began smoothly. The drones launched and began generating convincing sensor anomalies several kilometers from their actual position. As predicted, several Scourge patrol vessels diverted to investigate. Seleth guided the tiny pod through gaps in the patrol pattern with preternatural precision. They reached the outer hull of the central hub without detection and used a specialized cutting tool to create an access point. Once inside, they faced a new challenge. The interior of the hub was a maze of biomechanical corridors that pulsed with eerie bioluminescence. Scourge worker drones, cyborg-like entities that served as the collective's physical maintenance units, moved throughout the structure. Seleth led them through service conduits and maintenance passages, avoiding contact when possible. When confrontation was unavoidable, they used targeted electromagnetic pulses to temporarily disable drones without alerting the wider system. They reached what Tanaka identified as a secondary processing node, Not the main core, but a crucial connection point that would give them access to the system's architecture. While Seleth stood guard, Tanaka interfaced his specialized equipment with the Scourge systems. "I need time to locate the core's vulnerabilities," he whispered, fingers dancing across his portable console. "Their security architecture is like nothing I've encountered before. It's not just code, it's more like thought patterns crystallized into logic." "How long?" Rostova asked. 10 minutes. Maybe 15. They had been inside the facility for 23 minutes when their luck ran out. A security scan swept through the section they occupied, a routine measure, but one they hadn't anticipated. Alarms began to sound, a pulsing biological wail that seemed to come from the structure itself. "They know we're here," Seleth hissed, drawing her energy blade. "We have minutes at most before we're overwhelmed." "Keep working," Rostova ordered Tanaka. "We need that access." To Seleth, she added, "Hold them as long as you can." The first wave of Scourge security drones arrived moments later. Not the mindless worker units they'd encountered earlier, but combat models with integrated weapons and enhanced sensory capabilities. Seleth moved like liquid shadow, her blade cutting through the first 3 drones before they could establish a targeting lock. Rostova provided covering fire with her pulse pistol, but more drones were converging on their position. "Status, Lieutenant." "Almost there," Tanaka replied, his focus unbroken despite the chaos around him. "I've identified the core architecture. It's fascinating. The entire system operates on consensus algorithms, but there's a vulnerability in how they process contradictory inputs." A security drone broke through their perimeter. Seleth intercepted it, but took a glancing hit that left a smoking wound across her shoulder. She dispatched the drone but staggered back, clearly weakened. "I've got it," Tanaka exclaimed. "The core is vulnerable to logical paradoxes, statements that are self-contradictory within their own framework. It creates cascading errors in their consensus system." "Can you exploit that?" Rostova asked, firing continuously to keep the growing number of drones at bay. "Yes, but I need direct access to the main core. This node isn't sufficient." They faced an impossible choice. The main core was deeper within the facility through increasingly heavy security. They would never reach it and escape alive. "New plan," Rostova decided. "We return to the Whisper with what we've learned. The Alliance could develop a weapon based on this vulnerability." They began fighting their way back toward their entry point, but the opposition was intensifying. Seleth moved with diminished grace, her injury clearly hampering her abilities. They were still 2 sections away from their extraction point when she took another hit, this one driving her to her knees. "Leave me," she gasped. "I'll hold them here. Give you time." "Not happening," Rostova replied, helping the car to her feet. "We all go home, or none of us do." They reached their entry point with Scourge forces converging from all directions. The tiny pod barely had room for 3 under normal circumstances. With Seleth injured, the cramped quarters were even more challenging. The return journey to the Whisper was a blur of evasive maneuvers and close calls. As they docked with their ship, sensors indicated multiple Scourge vessels closing on their position. Their stealth had been compromised. Now only speed could save them. The Whisper burned hard for the edge of the shroud, pushing its engines beyond safety limits. Behind them, the first Scourge pursuit ships emerged from the nebula's swirling gases. "They're gaining," Tanaka reported from the tactical station. Estimated interception in 6 minutes. Rostova had hoped to clear the shroud before engaging the faster-than-light drive, but that was no longer an option. "Prepare for emergency FTL jump as soon as we reach the outer boundary of the nebula." Seleth, her wound hastily treated but still serious, managed a weak smile. "If we survive this, Captain, I believe I will have to revise my species' assessment of human tactics." "Let's survive first," Rostova replied. "Then you can write all the performance reviews you want." The Whisper emerged from the shroud with 3 Scourge cruisers in close pursuit. Their weapons found range immediately, the first salvo narrowly missing the human vessel's stern. "FTL drive charging," Tanaka reported. 30 seconds to jump capability. The next Scourge volley struck home. The Whisper shuddered as energy blasts tore into its port side. Systems flickered, and damage reports flooded the small bridge. Hull breach in Section 4, Tanaka called out. Emergency seals holding. FDL drive still functional. 20 seconds to jump. The Scourge vessels were coordinating their fire now, bracketing the Whisper to prevent evasive action. Another hit destroyed one of the main thrusters, sending the ship into a controlled spin. 10 seconds to jump. The sensors suddenly lit up with new contacts. A large formation of ships approaching at high speed. Alliance signatures, Tanaka confirmed with surprise. It's the Fifth Fleet. They're engaging the Scourge. Indeed, a battle group, led by Admiral Forlag's logical conclusion, had arrived and immediately opened fire on the Scourge pursuers. The unexpected intervention gave the Whisper the seconds it needed. FDL ready, Tanaka announced. Jump, ordered Rostova. The damaged ship disappeared into faster-than-light travel, leaving the developing battle behind. They had escaped, but the Whisper was critically damaged. Life support was failing, and the FDL drive was destabilizing. We need to drop back to normal space, Tanaka advised after checking the systems. The drive can't sustain this jump. They emerged in an uncharted system. The Whisper now little more than a drifting wreck. Emergency power kept life support functioning, but little else remained operational. Send a distress signal on Alliance frequencies, Rostova ordered. Already done, Tanaka replied. But given our location, it could be days before help arrives. He hesitated, and the Scourge will be looking for us. Rostova considered their situation. They had escaped with vital intelligence about the assimilation engine and its potential vulnerability to logical paradoxes. But if they were captured or destroyed before delivering this information, their mission would have been for nothing. Then she had an idea. Lieutenant, you said the Scourge Corps was vulnerable to logical paradoxes, statements that contradict themselves within their own framework. Yes, Tanaka confirmed. Their consensus algorithms can't process true contradictions. It creates cascading errors throughout their system. Could we weaponize that? Create some kind of virus or signal that embodies these paradoxes? Tanaka considered the question. Theoretically, yes. We could design a data package containing nested logical contradictions, statements that are both true and false simultaneously within their own reference frame. If introduced into their network, it would be like introducing doubt into a mind that's never experienced it, Rostova finished. Exactly, but we need a way to deliver it directly into their communication network, and we need to survive long enough to build it. They set to work immediately, Tanaka coding, while Rostova and Seleth focused on keeping the ship's failing systems operational. Hours stretched into days as they waited for rescue, always alert for signs of Scourge pursuit. On the third day, sensors detected ships approaching. Alliance signatures. The rescue fleet, led by Forlag himself, secured the Whisper and transferred its crew to the logical conclusion. There, in the ship's medical bay, Rostova briefed the Admiral on what they had discovered. An assimilation engine, Forlag repeated, his normally impassive features showing genuine alarm. And you believe it could actually function as described? Dr. Thorne is convinced it could, Rostova replied. And the scale of the construction suggests they're preparing for mass processing. We must destroy it immediately, Forlag declared. I will request authorization for a full-scale assault. That will be suicide, Rostova countered. You saw the defenses.